included heritage. So students come here.
For graduates from high school.
Describing why Nanhua is one of the
If you invest in your people,
Otgonbattai хамт англиар ярилцъя, англи хэлээр ярилцдаг нэвтрүүлгийн маань энэ удаагийн дугаар эхэлж байна. За өнөөдөр манай зочноор Америк нэгдсэн улсын олон улсын хөгжлийн агентлагийн төлөөлөгч ноён Daniel Miller гэж хүн оролцож байгаа. Тэгэхээр энэ хүн маань бол Монгол улсад Америкийн засгийн газрыг төлөөлөн хөгжлийн хөтөлбөрүүдийг хэрэгжүүлж байгаа. За мөн хөдөө аж ахуй болон бусад чиглэлүүдээр ажиллаж байгаа ийм хүн байгаа. Тэгээд энэ хүнтэй өнөөдөр бид нар одоо өөрийнх нь хэрэгжүүлж байгаа, байгууллага нь хэрэгжүүлж байгаа төслийн талаар, за мөн өөрийнх нь сонирхдаг судалгааны сэдэв, за мөн Америкийн нэгдсэн улс эргүүчээс Америкийн нэгдсэн улсад яаж суралцах уу, өөрийнх нь туршлагаас хуваалцах зэрэг боловсролын чиглэлээр ярилцсанаа. Mr. Daniel Miller, thank you for your time, and I would like to begin the program by asking you to introduce yourself, where you're from, and what you do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to come here today. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Daniel Miller, and I currently am the Senior Development Advisor for the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, here in Mongolia with our office in the U.S. Embassy. USAID is the U.S. government's development agency, so we fund development programs in economic growth, education, health, things like that in various countries throughout the world.
Sure. I was looking at your blogs and websites, and I was fascinated by the fact that you were so much intrigued with nomadic civilization. And I looked at some of your Tibetan publications and things like that. So why are you so much passionate about the nature, environment, indigenous culture?
Okay, well, I grew up on a farm in the southern part of the state of Minnesota in the central Midwest part of the United States. So I grew up on a farm, milking cows every morning before going to school. And of course we had horses and was outside in the nature all the time. And when I was young, when I was 21, I went to Nepal as a Peace Corps volunteer, American Peace Corps volunteer. And I know there's Peace Corps programs here in Mongolia also. And I was working with farmers and herders in Nepal, and they were Tibetan-speaking yak herders. So I became interested in yak herders and nomads, and then went on to study more about grassland ecology and range management, and eventually started doing more work with nomads, both in the Himalaya of Nepal and Bhutan, and then also in Tibet. So I spent many years working with nomads in Tibet, and then also here in Mongolia. I first came to Mongolia to work on an agricultural development program 23 years ago. So I have maintained this interest in the natural sciences and working with herders. And I think partly because I worked as a cowboy for many years in Montana, I have I like people that make their living raising animals or that are on horseback and that. So Mongolia is a wonderful place for me to be working.
When you compare Montana or Nepal, Tibet, especially you come from the United States, what are the similarities between Mongolia and the United States in terms of agricultural setting? And of course you're involved in developing our agricultural sector.
Well, in the western United States, the state of Montana, where I went to school and where I worked for cowboys for many years, there's a lot of similarities with Mongolia. You have large, vast, open steppe lands. You have beautiful forest and mountains. Montana doesn't have the deserts like you have in the Gobi here in Mongolia, but you do have desert areas in the southwestern United States. So I think this similarity, I can be driving across parts of Mongolia and I think, my goodness, this looks like my home in Montana. Or I can be in Montana thinking that, my goodness, this looks like parts of Mongolia I've seen. So there's a real similarity that makes it, for me, nicer and more enjoyable to be here.
You're working for the USAID, the United States Development Agency. What are the projects that you're working on?
Well, here in Mongolia, we are starting to phase down our program, but we have been working here since 1991 when we first opened. And a lot of our work was early on with economic reforms, helping Mongolia make the transition to a market economy, economic development in the rural areas. We had a large program called the Gobi Initiative that was working with herder communities in the rural areas. We also had a program here in the area around Ulaanbaatar called the GARE Initiative that was really trying to look at small-scale business advisory to people in the GEAR districts. We also funded a lot of work with nature conservation. It was called the Eastern Steppes, working on the grasslands, supporting work on ecological research on wildlife such as the gazelle and birds. So our assistance program has run kind of the whole gamut from environmental conservation to economic development to working with NGOs on governance. And now as we phase out, we will be having some small programs still trying to work on with the SME sector, helping to develop business plans and things like that.
You are an agricultural person.
Yes.
Because of that, I want to ask you, Mongolia is a sector of agriculture. What is the challenge and what's the opportunity? How would you say?
I think Mongolia has a lot of challenges. First of all, there's a lot of opportunities for especially livestock-based agriculture here. Mongolia has been a country they've been herding livestock for thousands of years. They have grasslands. I think the changes that have taken place in the last 20 years with going to a market economy has kind of disrupted a lot of the traditional systems that they had. There's been a lot of overgrazing that has happened, but the grasslands of Mongolia are very resilient so that future generations will be able to raise animals or grow crops as well. But there is opportunities.
Let's say I give you $5 million. What would you invest in?
If you gave me $5 million, I would try to go buy a bunch of Selingi red cattle, some of the best cattle I could find, some good horses, and I would start raising beef cattle somewhere maybe in Arhangai. Or maybe I would go buy some yaks in Arhangai because I've done research on yaks, and I would try to raise the best yaks in Mongolia.
Why not Canadians and Americans are not investing as much as they should in our agricultural sector?
You know, I think any investor is going to want to make sure that his investment gets a return on his investment. And I think some of the regulatory environments right now are not as conducive for investing in agriculture for foreigners. You know, that can change with transparency, making sure that everything is above the board, and this is where internet and communication can help with that transparency. But you know, investors there's always people with money looking for a good investment. And as one person told me once, you know, there's no lack of money, there's a lack of good ideas. So I think if somebody comes up with a good business plan that the bank will say, yes, this makes sense, you've penciled it out economically, you know, banks will support it, investors will support it. There needs to be the enabling business environment for that to happen, but you know, it probably will.
Дэлхийн боловсролыг Тайван. Яагаад Тайванд суралцах вэ? Англи хэлний жинхэнэ орчин. Олон төрлийн тэтгэлэгт хөтөлбөрүүд, нөхөрсөг ард түмба соёлын өөр хүрээ. Олон улсын технологийн сургуулиуд, ардчилсан аюулгүй орчин. Хямд зардлаар чанартай боловсрол эзэмших боломж. Монгол дахь Тайваны боловсролын төв харилцах утасны дугаар 99 техник 16 62 99 10 68 58 99 14 51 72.
Хоол шингээ бархлаа сайжруулна. Бас яс бэхжүүлдэг болохоор миний хүү зөндөө өндөр болно шин.
Бас ээжид багтны хэрэгтэй юм чинь бид хоёр жимстэй өөр тавьдаг хөө.
Хүүгийн мандуртай энэ жимстэй йогурт өдөртэй болсон гинэ.
Жимстэй йогурт суулаатай боллоо. Тагны дотор эсхийг хусаж арилгаад код гарвал 150 101 дугаард мессеж илгээж 7 хоног бүр азтан болоорой. Та өөрийн утаснаас 5 удаа мессеж илгээснээр супер азтанд оролцох эрхтэй болно. Аз дагуулсан 17 хоног. Жимстэй йогурт.
Sure. A little bit of off the topic, but tell me a little bit about your research interests, your education background. I know that you're a graduate of University of Montana, and your undergraduate, and then your master's. I don't know if you have a PhD, but what have you been researching?
Well, my master's degree was in forestry from the University of Montana, but with a focus on rangeland management. My bachelor's degree was from University of Wisconsin-Madison, and it was also in biology, but I actually took a lot of courses on South Asian studies and anthropology. So I'm interested in anthropology, rangeland ecology, and I did a lot of research on rangelands and nomads in the Himalaya of Nepal and Bhutan, and also in Tibet, and some research here in Mongolia. I'm interested, of course, in the ecology of the grasslands, and understanding the grasslands and what takes place there, and the interactions that man and his animals, his livestock, have on the grasslands, as well as the interactions of wild animals on the grasslands. I have a lot of friends that have become wildlife biologists, or they've studied wildlife biology, and they're very interested in studying, argali or gazelle behavior and things like that. But they oftentimes they don't forget. But I feel that they don't understand well enough that the animals have to eat grass out there. So grasses are fundamental to understanding these ecosystems. I've also done a lot of research on Tibetan nomads in terms of how many animals they raise and for what purposes and for when. So really trying to understand the entire pastoral production system. And this has kind of been my passion for the last really almost 30 or 40 years, is understanding the ecology of the grasslands of Central Asia and the nomads that are there, and the wildlife, and how it all kind of interacts in a system. So I've been fortunate in being able to have turned my personal interests into a career as well, that was able to work in this field. But it took a lot of hard work early on and a lot of perseverance to be able to get to where I'm at now.
What's the feature of nomadic-based agriculture, this sector, and how long can we keep Mongolian nomadic-based agriculture? I mean, when you look at Tibet or Nepal, do we have to go into semi-intensive farming eventually? And then if we go towards farming, then we're going to lose a lot of our culture, pasture-based.
This has been a question throughout the world. I mean, in Africa, where there's a lot of nomads, or there were also in the Himalayas, in Tibet, a lot of people feel that nomads should be settled. I think that you can still have a mobile type of livestock production. You need to provide education and health services for the herders. But in many places, on extensive grasslands, the best way to use the grass out there is by herders moving, not being in one place for a set period of time, but to be able to move. In fact, I just recently brings to mind a piece of Mongolian proverb that I had made into a calligraphy, traditional calligraphy. And it has the word for nomad, and then it has a saying, never stay in one place too long. Because it's when you stay in that one place for a long time that you start to degrade the area. So traditionally, of course, nomads would move, but it's a misconception that nomads just wandered freely. There was always prescribed movements that they had. And even here in Mongolia, there's areas that they always reserved for times in the winter, or areas that they would go on otor on in the fall to fatten animals. So I think understanding the many positive aspects of the traditional pastoral system here in Mongolia is needed, and try to devise a new kind of scientific way that incorporates traditional practices along with what the grasslands can produce, along with scientific information. So I think there is a future for mobile livestock raising on the grasslands. It might mean that there'd be, it might mean that families would have to stay in SUM centers or something like that so children go to school, or that health facilities are provided, but the livestock should still be able to move more frequently.
I know that U.S. beef is pretty popular in Korea or Taiwan or Japan even, and I question why Mongolia cannot sell our meat abroad. And then one of the concerns, the answers go like this: oh, because our cows have disease, but it's not USDA approved. Because we move a lot, our meat is not as tender as the American steak. I don't know, there's so many excuses, What's the problem?
Well, I think there's certainly, there probably are certain challenges with some of the livestock diseases, but they've been controlled elsewhere. It can be done. It just means a dedicated veterinary service to make sure that the animals are healthy, and that there's an inspection service that takes place when meat is sold. Yes, to provide a good quality, beef, you may have to look at raising the animals a bit differently, but it can be done. We did it in America on the rangelands also, in Canada, Australia as well. I think a lot of it is just being geared towards what the market is demanding and then trying to meet that market in ways that you know how.
Sure, yeah. This program is actually designed for students who are intended to study abroad. Now, the program provides comprehensive information about studying in the United States, Taiwan, Korea, and any of the developed countries. And I just want to ask you, in America, of course, if you look at the top 100 world Thomson Reuters ranking, I think the American universities starts at Harvard University and goes down to 80% of the world highest ranking institutions are from the United States. Why is that?
Well, I think one reason is that America has invested in education. Many of the top universities in the States, they have a very strong research program. And so you're getting some of the best scientists in the field working at those universities and teaching at those universities, so they've been able to keep really on top of their field. So good universities have a large research program. Just recently, I have a daughter that is now a freshman, or just finished her first year at Tufts University in Boston. And so I had an older daughter that went to a university in England. But, so I went through this whole process of trying to select. Well, my daughter did the selection, but assisting her with which university to go to. And it's quite a daunting task for young people that are 16, 17 years old trying to think about, okay, what school am I going to go to? What's my future going to be? And there's a big difference in schools in America. Of course, a lot of people, especially overseas, they want to go to Harvard or they want to go to Stanford. They want to go to the top schools. But in some ways, you can get just as good, if not a better education at a smaller school. My daughter is at Tufts University, which has, I think, a student body of about 4,000 or 5,000. So it's smaller, but a very well-known school. It also has a good, graduate program as well. But she was even saying that in the smaller universities, you have more interaction with professors. In some of the larger universities, like, for example, I finished my bachelor's degree at University of Wisconsin-Madison, which has like 30 or 40,000 students at university.
How did it boil down to Tufts?
It boiled down to Tufts because we were very impressed with the counselor that gave the tour and gave the introduction. In fact, we had been to about 10 or 12 schools by then. And I remember sitting in the front row and listening to him, just talking about why Tufts is important and what Tufts offers. And then afterwards, I went up and congratulated him. I said, wow, you really did a great job. I thought it was fantastic. And my daughter did too. And then when she got the acceptance letter, she got a personal email from that same guidance counselor saying, gee, we think that you would be a perfect match for Tufts, and we hope you will decide to come here. So sometimes it's this personal touch that the school can make.
But how did you prepare your daughter towards Tufts. I mean, Tufts is one of the private, prestigious universities in the United States. But what did you have to do to prepare her from high school?
Oh, I think she took, because she went to high school her last 2 years at a international school in Manila, so she took the International Baccalaureate program, which I think is an excellent way to prepare for universities. Now, students that want to go to universities in England or Europe, I think the International Baccalaureate program is it's a requirement. In America, to get into colleges, it's not. But it's very hard work, that International Baccalaureate program, but it prepares you very well for college. College is almost easier at that time. So I think just, an emphasis on the studies was important, an emphasis on sports. My daughter played sports as well, which, provide that opportunity for working with the teamwork and things like that. She did a lot of volunteer work with communities in terms of going to some of the poverty areas in Manila and working with school, kind of school youth and that. So I think that universities are looking for people that of course have, good grades and are academically good, but also people that, have a broad range of interest and a sense of service to the community. And also those that exhibit a sense of passion, I mean, a university that's accepting thousands of students, they are also looking to have a diverse class coming in, right? So you may have the best grades, but they may decide that, well, we need to be diversified. So they're looking for students that will stand out, for students that will kind of add to their diverse mix. And fortunately for my daughter, her experience is that we were fortunate, but it worked out. But she did a lot of the work on her own in terms of investigating, through the internet and through the school, which schools might be the best fit for her, working with her counselor at the school to say, well, we think you should consider this school or that school. And but a lot of the work was on her to do it. Yeah.
Дэлхийн боловсролыг Тайван. Яагаад Тайванд суралцах вэ? Англи хэлний жинхэнэ орчин. Олон төрлийн тэтгэлэгт хөтөлбөрүүд, нөхөрсөг ард түмба соёлын өөр хүрээ. Олон улсын технологийн сургуулиуд, ардчилсан аюулгүй орчин. Хямд зардлаар чанартай боловсрол эзэмших боломж. Монгол дахь Тайваны боловсролын төв харилцах утасны дугаар 99 16 62 99 10 68 58 99 14 51 72.
Хүний биеийн сайн тий.
Хоол шингээ дархлаа сайжруулна. Бас яс бэхжүүлдэг болохоор миний хүү зөндөө өндөр болно шин.
Бас ээжэд вахтны хэрэгтэй юм чинь. Бид хоёр жимстэй өөр тавиад ирэх.
Хүүгийн манд дуртай энэ жимстэй явуулт амжилттай болсон гинэ.
Жимстэй йогурт суудатай боллоо. Тагны дотор эсхийг хусаж арилгаад код гарвал 150 101 дугаард мессеж илгээж 7 хоног бүр азтан болоорой. Та өөрийн утаснаас 5 удаа мессеж илгээснээр супер азтанд оролцох эрхтэй болно. Аз дагуулсан 17 хоног. Жимстэй йогурт.
За, намайг Батэрэлт гэдэг би сүүлчийн 1 сар энэхүү глобал өдөртөгчийн IBT-гийн TOEFL-ийн ангид 1 сарын хугацаанд одоо сууж байна. Энэхүү сүүлчийн 1 сарын хугацаанд миний сонсох, бичих, ярих болон унших чадвар маш хурдан хөгжиж чадсан. Би үүндээ маш их баяртай байна. Тэгээд энэхүү сургалтын бас нэг давуу тал гэвэл бичих болон ярих чадварыг гадаад багш нар зааж өгдөг. Одоо биднэрт энэхүү хичээлүүд маань илүү сонирхолтой, илүү ойлгомжтой болж өгдөг. Одоогоор би IBT TOEFL өгөөд өндөр оноо авах зорилготой байгаа. Тэгээ үүндээ би хүрнэ гэж найдаж байгаа. Тэгээ энэхүү IBT TOEFL ашиглаж би улмаа Тайван улс руу очиж сурах бодолтой байгаа. Одоо IBT TOEFL сонирхож байгаа хүмүүс энэхүү сургалтыг сонирхож үзээрэй гэж зөвлөе.
Hello, my name is Brian Bryce.
Сайн байна уу? Намайг Brian Bryce гэдэг. Би глобал өдөртөгч гадаад хэлний сургуульд багшилдаг. Энэ бол миний ажлын өрөө. Би энд хичээлэх материалыг бэлтгэдэг. Манай сургалтанд хамрагдахаар төлөвлөж байгаа болон шийдэж амжаагүй байгаа бүх хүмүүст энд сураарай гэж зөвлөмөр байна. Хэрвээ чи гадаадын өндөр хөгжилтэй оронд өөрийнхөө хүссэн мэргэжлэр суралцахаар төлөвлөж байгаа бол чамд IBT-ийн өндөр оноо хэрэгтэй. Манай гадаад хэлний сургууль нь IBT TOEFL бэлтгэж эхлээд байна. Миний хувьд IBT TOEFL-ийн бичих болон ярих чадварыг заадаг. Бид Америкийн нэгдсэн улсын Learn New боловсролын байгууллагаас гаргасан IBT TOEFL-ийн шилдэг интерактив программыг сургалтандаа хэрэгжүүлж эхлээд байна. Бид та бүхнийг туршлагатай багш нараар удирдуулан өөрийн хүссэн өндөр оноогоо авахд танд туслаад баяртай байх болно. Глобал удирдагч гадаад хэлний сургуульд ирж суралцахыг хүрж байна.
Сайн байна уу баян гэдэг. Би глобал удирдагч сангийн хагас жилийн IBT TOEFL-ийн ангид суралцдаг. Глобал удирдагч сангийн IBT TOEFL-ийн ангид сонгосон шалтгаан нь суралцах арга барил өндөр түвшинд бэлтгэгдсэн бөгөөд гадаадын програмчлалд илүү ойртсон мөн суралцахад маш таатай нөхцөлтэй 7 хоногт 4 удаа 2 цагаар хичээлдэг сургалтын практик он зэргийг нэгэн зэргээр хослуулж явуулдаг. Америк багштайгаараа даваа талтай бөгөөд Монгол оюутнуудаа тулж харьцаж хичээлүүдээ маш сонирхолтойгоор явуулдаг байгаа. Миний хувьд IBT TOEFL-ийн ангид суралцсанараа англи хэлний унших, бичих, ярих чадварыг IBT TOEFL-ийн шалгалтын түвшинд бүрэн эзэмших боломжтой болсон. Мөн би глобал удирдагч сангийн шугамар 50-ны Нанхагийн их сургууль 100% тэтгэлэгтэй суралцах болсондоо маш их баяртай байна. Оюутан залуучууд та бүгдээ ч мэйл энэхүү хөтөлбөр тамирагдан гадаад ихтэй сургуулиудад тэтгэлэгтэй суралцахыг уриалж байна.
The test scores such as SAT, ACT, of course, the higher you score on those, especially on the ACT, the more likely you can get into Ivy League school. So was there any particular investment you had to do?
Well, she did a number of the preparatory tests you can take, kind of like practice tests. So she did those, and of course she felt she didn't. I thought she did great. She would have done much better than I had done, but she felt she didn't do well enough, so she wanted to take it again. It was a very stressful time. This was in her 11th grade. And I think, what you have to always, as a parent, just try to give the children support and say, look, just do the best you can. Don't worry. Sometimes karma works out for where you end up deciding. But of course, you want to set goals and try to go to a school that you think is the best fit. Sometimes it doesn't work out also. You have to be prepared to say, look, this maybe didn't work for me, and then look at other options as well.
For Mongolian students who wish to study, top-ranking universities like Tufts, what would you advise?
I would say take advantage of any programs that the U.S. Embassy offers through the Public Affairs Service at the American Corner. There's a lot of resources there about universities. There's a lot of talks given by either Americans about America or English programs. Be engaged with your community in terms of service orientation, working with poor people or reading to other children. So you need to be able to, when the colleges are looking at your application, it's kind of like you're applying for a job, and your resume has to stand out. So what is it that will make you stand out more? Of course, taking hard courses and doing well in it will be part of it. Your test scores are part of it. But the service that you do or team sports is also going to be very important. And then your own essay that you write that has to kind of talk about what you want about life.
Well, Mr. Miller, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much.
Come back to our program. We'll be lucky to bring you back and lecture to our students.
I would like that sometime, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Heritage. So students come here.
For graduates from high school.
Describing why Nanhua is one of the...
If you invest in your people,